Okay, so we're in a new part. This part is basically dealing with property developers. So this would be uh, summed up within Section 18 Cap B within the legislature, but there is because this follows the section of Section 18B, which was like the output VAT that the actual buyer has to levy out in terms of the going concern part. So, and this one is basically like, the following section to that one. Yeah, so the background to this one is about property developers. What happens to property developers is that they basically deal with property, they develop property, they would build like a fixed property, and they also buy land on which they likely would build that fixed property. So to them, this would have been trading stock, and as a result of them being in that business model, they would have claimed VAT, they would have been VAT vendors, because land and fixed property, irrespective of what kind of fixed property they were basically developing, there would have been like trading stock to them. So they would have incurred like quite a lot of like substantial costs in terms of the construction and in terms of just bringing about the actual project of making it a realization so far as developing a particular property was concerned. So because of the huge cost posed that they obviously would have like incurred, that was trading stock to them. So there was a bit of like a relief in the sense that they were at least able to claim that input on that, because that was them to be trading stock to them. So what consequently happens now, once the actual given property that they were likely working on is completed, they could do either one of the two things. Like they could likely just leave it on the market and just waiting for a buyer to basically come through and buy this particular property that the property developer obviously developed. But like there would obviously be challenges in the sense that in some instances it would take them a long time to find a potential buyer in which they'd obviously be able to buy this complete property that would have been developed and been ready to use. So the market was quite tough for them to actually get customers or buyers, efficiently, because the market was quite tough. So you could imagine that was quite a tough one for the property developers, because they already spent so much money, So some of them were actually, quite forced to actually rent out their properties so that they could maybe try and some sort of income. But now, when they suddenly rent out their units, they would now suddenly go from being, taxable supplies to suddenly being non-taxable supplies, because rentals is basically deemed to be an exempt supply. And because of that change in use of the actual trading stock to now being taxable supply and suddenly being an exempt supply, because it was suddenly getting to be into that exempt portion section so far as the rentals are concerned, that obviously came about with like, hey, SARS would obviously want a change in use, output VAT that would now suddenly have to be payable by them, which was quite a hard one for the property developers to basically go into. So SARS was quite aware of that okay, we understand that the market is quite tough for you, to gain like a potential client that would likely buy the property that you basically have and it's ready for use. So what we can do is we can allow you to actually uh, rent out your property for a period of about 36 months, you know, until you find such a buyer that will be able to buy your property. So the only reason why you're renting it out is basically for you to just be able to make up some ends in earning a bit of cash flow while you're still out there in the market hoping to gain like a client or a buyer so that you could actually sell the actual property. So now you're basically able to rent it out without being forced to actually process a change in use VAT adjustment. So SARS was basically giving the property developers like a relief of saying, okay, we'll allow you to rent it out, but your intention must still be that you'll basically be selling it within the 36-month duration that we basically have given you as a grace period. So what would likely be happening in that sense is that ultimately now they would not have to process like an output VAT adjustment uh, to the actual uh, property changing its nature from now being training stock to rentals, because the intention of the buyer is very important in the sense that it's still his intention to actually find the actual buyer. So SARS gives you a relief for 36 months in which you can still you'd not have to process that change in use VAT output that would be due for SARS. But should you go over the 36 months grace period, at that time, then there would arise that forced change in use VAT adjustment, basically, and you'd have to obviously process that through, So consequently, that gave the actual property developer some sort of relief. So that is the basic background to this. However, so in other instances, other property developers still get to sell the unit before the 36 months period, and that would obviously make it like a usual taxable supply sale in terms of them still having trading stock within that mist, because they're still within that grace period, and they just process output VAT as like the normal process of having to basically apply output VAT on like a normal sales transaction. And others that were obviously unable to sell, they would also be faced with certain implications. So that is the background to this whole property developer story, which is all kept up in section 18B, and we'll basically go into the few implications that can arise as a result of these hints that we've basically just touched on. And yeah, we'll basically look at a few on the whiteboard. Alright then.